Hey, Deserving listeners, The Curious Case of Natalia Grace. This is the second season, which I didn't know existed. So let's watch and see what happens.
The things that Christine and Michael have said that I've done is a lie. It was all copied off the movie Orphan. Ukrainian girl, Russian girl, check. Orphan, check. All this crazy stuff. Standing at the end of the bed with a knife. Check. That's why I want to do this.
I saw during the first season of the documentary a reference to this movie, but I don't watch horror movies. It's not my thing. Sorry to all you horror fans out there. I love things that are horror-ish, like the movie Witch. I love that movie. Or Midsummer. I loved that movie, that kind of thing. You know, it's sort of like horror, but not the kind of quintessential horror. I imagine Orphan is like kind of more quintessential horror. Anyway, so I heard that, but I've recently been learning from some of y'all and others that there's a serious allegation or a serious speculation that the parents saw the movie Orphan in 2009 and then attempted to recreate it by finding a child from Russia or Ukraine who fits the bill and then proceeded to create a whole storyline, a bunch of lies, or manipulating the child into exhibiting some of the behaviors. And I find that to be fantastical. It's possible, and this story has a lot of fantastical claims and facts, so it's possible, but it doesn't seem likely to me. That's such a huge thing to do. I mean, why would someone do that? There are much easier ways to get attention if that's why they were doing it, right? So there's that. Now, do people make bad decisions in life? Yeah, absolutely. But I've never heard of a case that was in that ballpark. Maybe one exists, but that'd be hard to believe, but possible.
And this, that, and the third. But then you gonna come into that apartment that y'all dropped me off in and pretty much try to murder me. I just want people to know.
So I don't think we heard anything along those lines because the first season didn't ask her side of the story. So it sounds like she has some bomb to drop regarding an allegation that the parents tried to murder her.
It's true that I told everybody that I'm 22 years old. But Christine literally trained me to lie. That's what makes it worse. The fact that it had to come from me. And they could use that against me. Like, oh, but you said it.
Yeah, this is starting to look akin to something like Munchausen's by proxy, right? Where you have a parent who, for some reason, is getting the child to lie or present in a way that is a deception, whether it's with Munchausen, getting a kid to act like with Gypsy Rose, that the mother forced Gypsy Rose to act like she couldn't walk, for example. In addition to I did a whole deep dive on that a while back. So if you want to listen to that or watch the documentary, it's pretty good. I think there's a new one that I haven't watched. But similar to that, you have a mother allegedly wanting to get rid. That's my best guess, is that the mother adopted Natalia, at least mostly in good faith. I can't know that. I don't think that's a popular opinion, but it would be unusual if it wasn't this. So at least that's just my top hypothesis there. So the mother adopted her in good faith and found that it was very difficult, and also was seemingly, again, with the other allegations about the mother's behavior, she had no way of coping with this emotionally and as a parent, and started to become abusive and might have even felt bad about it, or at least alarmed, at least worried about the criminal implications if she were caught parenting Natalia. I don't know. There's just a lot of guesses here. But at some point, the mom wanted to get rid of her and maybe Michael was involved in this too, but at least if we just think about the mom, and then the mom's thinking, well, how do I get rid of her? And maybe influenced by the movie Orphan, I don't know, but probably just grasping at straws, like the allegation regarding at the creamery, the farm place with the electric fence. And it could have been that the mom just saw that as an opportunity, because they're being told the way the documentary told us, like, she's at the creamery with the family, and the staff there is saying, okay, there are electric fences, you got to be careful, da da da. And from my knowledge, it doesn't kill humans. I grew up kind of in that direction. I grew up just outside of Seattle, and there were electric fences that we would urinate on. In the 70s, we didn't have Xbox, so we had to find some way to entertain ourselves. So it was either that or eating, daring your friend to eat a slug or a worm or something, So sometimes you did one, sometimes you did the other. I guess we also would climb trees and fall out of them occasionally. Anyway, so, from my knowledge, I don't think they're designed to kill people. That would be kind of a hazard. They're there to be strong enough to be painful when livestock bump into it, right? And they don't need to kill people. But anyway, but I could imagine the staff exaggerating just to make sure people stay away from it. It's like, it's no joke. Don't play around with it. It could really seriously hurt you. Might even kill you or something. Now, having said that, don't take my advice on that. I don't know. Don't walk up to, don't pee on an electric fence just because I said that we dared our friends to do it. Maybe it does kill you. I don't know. And I'm guessing there are heart conditions or something that could result in death. Anyway, point is that speculation, the mom hears that and says, ooh, opportunity, and then says, hey, the rest of the family go off, and then Christine and Natalia are sort of by it. Natalia is saying, I can't walk because my shoes are hurting, I'm bleeding or something. That was Natalia's side of the story. We could imagine that. Christine's like, okay, what if I make a big scene and the staff come over and the police are called, and I'll say that she tried to kill me, and at the very least I can use this in an overall campaign to make a case that she's a danger and I can get rid of her. And then all that is to say that eventually she figures out, this is all speculative, that maybe a better campaign is if I brainwash the child to say a bunch of things constantly, and maybe that will help so I can get rid of her, right? And then they stumble upon the age thing and run with that, and then that ends up working. So you could see how a parent who is struggling and has issues and maybe a compromised sense of empathy, and you could see how a parent like that might go down a road like that, unfortunately.
But people don't know what happened in that house. They tortured me. I was abused. Christine is the real monster. Michael is an accomplice to the monster.
Okay, that's interesting phrasing. She's saying that Christine is the monster and Michael was an accomplice to the monster. Yeah.
Because he went along with everything that Christine said.
And we could see that if it's true, which we can't know, at least that it's true enough what Michael was saying, that he was abused and intimidated by Christine, that he was actually another victim and was going along with the parenting and maybe even perpetrated the abuse as well, but wouldn't have done that unless he was being coerced or controlled or something. That does happen. It's sometimes hard to picture that when it comes to men being in the victim role, but it absolutely happens. And we know that. Now, could someone who was a legit accomplice to abuse of a child make an excuse by saying that they were a victim? Yeah, it's just one of those things that we might not ever know. We probably will never know.
That's what I did. One time, Christine told me, she was like, I'm gonna show you what it's gonna feel like. if you do something wrong, I'm gonna pepper spray you. Christine told me to keep my eyes open, and then she just pepper sprayed me.
Who knows? But given everything we heard from a lot of other sources, most notably Jacob, the oldest son, who didn't say anything like this, but did indicate some abusive behavior from Christine, and was heavily alluding to the fact that he was only talking about a small amount of what he had seen. We can imagine this being true. And I, as a therapist, of course, have heard about countless accounts of abuse, both from adult clients telling me what they went through as children, and from the children themselves having recently been through the abuse. And I've heard it from the abusive parents. I would treat perpetrators, and they would tell me eventually what they had done. Some perpetrators would say it with pride, so there was that. But after a while in this field, and if you work in the field, you know this too, that you start to get a sense for a spectrum and these kinds of things. Because on one hand, you're like, well, pepper spray, it's temporary, it's awful, but it's not like breaking an arm or causing unconsciousness. But it is the markers of that behavior, at least to me on my spectrum, this is top 20% types of abuse that you could do to a child. It's calculated, it's emotional as well. It's one thing for a parent to strike out at a child, like the older child is about to take the younger child's toy and the parent says no, and strikes the child. That's not good. It's illegal. Stop that. But as a child, there's a likelihood of like, oh, well, there's a cause and effect. And it's not good that I was hit, but at least there's some logic to it. For this, it appears that Christine was saying, you will lie to the public and to authorities, and if you don't, then this is what I'm going to do to you. And it's calm. And what it says is, because like the parent who just strikes, 2 minutes later, they might actually feel remorse or at the very least care and show care for the child. But when you have this kind of behavior as a child, it's rational to conclude this person does not love me. They might not be capable of loving anybody. And they're thinking of ways of how to harm me. That is a very, very, it's unnerving. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's a new year, so of course it's time for New Year's resolutions. But often those are just manifestations of internalized harmful voices that tell us we're not good enough. So instead of making a resolution to change something, let's recognize that we are already good enough. Now, most people think of therapy as a place for us to work on our problems, but there are several schools of thought within the field of psychotherapy that adamantly reject that paradigm, like narrative therapy and solution-focused. Instead, these clinicians help us focus on what we're already doing well. And by helping us do that, data shows that we often will gravitate towards more beneficial patterns. Well, one place you can find such therapists is on BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, it's definitely worth giving a try. So celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
And I couldn't do anything about it. She literally made me sit there for like 10 minutes. Until I could finally go and wash it out.
Also, another detail that I think, in my opinion, lends to the credibility of the story is that if you were trying to gain sympathy, I think you would typically come up with a different lie.
And even then, it still hurt. And she didn't care.
Yeah, and that's the kicker, like I was saying earlier, is that the parent just didn't care. Again, abuse is wrong, but if you have an overreactive parent who also loves the children, and is occasionally abusive and also loves and is warm or shows love and preference for the child, at least most of the time, or at least some of it, even just some of the time, then the child at least can bank on that. But to have a parent that might not care about you at all and is out to get you is, it's, and then knowing where she came from before she even came to the family, you just imagine the hopes that she had being adopted and thinking, okay, maybe this is a family, because the initial phase of their relationship was probably very positive, and she was probably a little hesitant, but hopeful. And then to have a parent like Christine would be the final nail in the coffin in a lot of ways. And so you could see someone just giving up, say, fuck it, I'm just going to get a knife and I don't know, I'll just scare these people.
Christine was going to push the envelope as far as she could to try to break Natalia. So Christine starts putting words in Natalia's mouth. This is what you tell people. This is what you say.
So my skeptical mind is always trying to evaluate what I'm being told. And we have an edit, and we have the noise and the music, and we have a legal expert who is hired by the documentarians, I believe, who was not there. She has heard accounts, but she's stating it as if it's fact. The mother told her to say this. We don't know anything. Is it likely? It seems likely, but we don't know. We just have to say, I don't know. That's what makes these situations just so heartbreaking, because if we knew, then we could know what to do, right? But if we don't know, then we just don't know. And that's why we need juries, and we need investigations, and we need people there so they can observe.
There was a little ID tag inside of her bag when we adopted her that had the original family's information on it. I have never met them in person.
I have no idea why they would say they never met the Cicconi's when they literally met them at the adoption agency. Like, I remember having to wait for who knows how long while the...
Okay. Now, memories are weird for all these individuals, particularly for Natalia, because she was very young and traumatized. And I haven't even talked about dissociation and dissociative identity disorder, which is a common occurrence with her background. So when you suffer from conditions related to or actually are dissociation, then a hallmark is that your memories are compromised, maybe even altered severely. So there's that. For Michael, when you have a lot happening, it's sort of like for us in the pandemic, which was 4 years ago, almost exactly when it started. There's so many things that happened, and you might be reminded of things like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. Yeah, remember when we all were desperate for toilet paper? I mean, actually, I just remembered, because in my head, I'm like, we weren't really impacted by that, but we were. I think there was a time in our house when Stacy and I were like, okay, we've got 2 rolls left, and we don't know when we're going to get another one. So, start thinking of other options or conserve, recycle, reuse. No, just joking. And so when there's a lot of chaos, particularly when it's not a typical situation, and every day or every minute there's a new drama, which it sounds like that's what it was like. It all just, you don't get a chance to download or vent and talk about it, so you can kind of lock in some memories, and it just sort of breezes past you. So for the parents, their memory would absolutely be affected by that. Also, we have individuals that have motivated reasoning to remember in a certain way, whether it's subconscious or conscious. Also, I am assuming that Christine and Michael have trauma history themselves, which can lead to dissociation, but more commonly can just lead to a lot of memory distortions.
Cicconi's talk to the Barnetts. Like, that's literally like how I remember it, like plain as day. So... Well,
she could be remembering accurately, but this was a long time ago for her, and she was, according to my notes, 4 years old. You know, you could see someone blending some memories together, but I don't know how relevant this is exactly, because even if Michael is just flat out lying about not having ever met the Cicconi's, I don't see how that really, other than it just points to the fact that Michael might be, at the very least, an unreliable narrator.
There was a lot of good memories there, but then it was like after a while, like...
Okay, she's talking about the first family she was adopted by in New Hampshire. The Cicconi's, I believe, is what they're called. And she is painting a picture of an ideal life with them.
One time, me and the little boy, Vero, we were just playing. I landed on Vero's arm wrong. And I just kept saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. But then Gary came in and he just started yelling.
Okay, who knows? It could have gone down the way she says. Of course, she was very young at the time, so her memories could have been altered, or she could be misremembering. There's also a possibility that she even knows in this moment, as she's telling the story, that this is not the entire truth, that she might have actually targeted the boy and hurt him, maybe seriously, maybe even more seriously than she's saying. And the parents did indeed suspect or even knew that she did it on purpose. I mean, given everything else we heard, that wouldn't be unusual. But it's possible that everything we heard was a lie. But typically, if you have a family that adopts a child, I think in the general public, if you're not in this world, I think, if I was to ask the general public, what percentage of adoptive parents are adopting in bad faith? They are adopting to abuse the child or to neglect the child or something like that. I imagine, I don't know, but my anecdotal sense is that people would put that at about like 30 to 40% or something like that, maybe 10%. And the fact is that it's a very rare thing. I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but I can tell you I've seen the research, and anecdotally, it's less than 1%. There's so many other ways. If you're a person who wants to harm people, there's a lot easier. I mean, it's so hard to adopt a child. It costs a lot of money. It takes time. There's all these hoops you have to jump through. It's really, really annoying. Too annoying, really, because every day that passes, children are left in need of adoption, and if they're in an orphanage or in a foster home or in another country where they're being passed around, then that child is incurring a lot of trauma that isn't going to help anybody, particularly the kid, but also the adoptive parents. So it's really hard to adopt kids. And so on average, in all likelihood, the Cicconi's did adopt her in good faith and are very altruistic people. At least part of them is very altruistic. They also could be horrible people in addition to that, but there's an altruism there, and they adopt her. And so for that family to be very motivated to get rid of her, so to speak, then there's a good chance that a lot of things happened that reversed their altruism. And given everything we heard, there's a pretty good chance, I'd put my money down on the speculation, the hypothesis that she repeatedly exhibited behavior that was a danger to other people and a concern. So that's just now there's a possibility that didn't happen, but as she's telling this story, now she might remember it this way, so she might not be lying technically.
And then as he was walking away, I was crying and I was mad. I said, I hate you. After that, Gary, he didn't like me anymore. That's what it felt like. It felt like he hated me.
And the other thing to think is that she is a very young child with some arrested development, perhaps, who is seeing the world through that primitive lens, if you will. And I mean, most kids that age are going to be that way anyway, but you imagine she might be a little delayed in that way, given her history. And we all understand that kids don't see the world objectively or as objectively as they could if they were older.
Then one day, I remembered
And it's just funny how this documentary, the editors, the producers, it's manipulative because the first time in season 1, when we were introduced to the New Hampshire family, they showed this really dark, foreboding driveway up to the house, and they were playing the evil music because in that time of the documentary, they were trying to make the Ciccone seem like this really mysterious, almost like a horror movie sort of family. But because they're trying now to depict the family as this great family and this ideal situation, they show us this image. And so, and this could literally not even be their house. It could just be an Airbnb that they decided to film. So I just want to point that out. It's like there's a lot of that kind of manipulation in this documentary.
And coming in my room, she told me, she was like, I'm not going to be your mom anymore, but I will always love you.
Okay, again, so her story, the narrative in terms of the edit, is that she innocently, accidentally hurt her brother, and then the dad yelled at her, and then they gave her away. Is that possible? Yes. Is it likely? No.
This little girl is available for adoption. And there were 3 little people.
Now, I want to be clear. Do I support what the Ciccone family did? No, I don't know the circumstances. Is it possible that the New Hampshire family, the parents, were way too quick to abandon Natalia? Yeah, it is possible. That does happen sometimes. So I'm just saying that it's just hard to know what happened. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Please, everybody, check in with yourself because this is hard stuff. Some of you may have been through a very similar situation, maybe worse. At the very least, witnessing and hearing about the difficulties of this family is distressing. It can be demoralizing. It can be triggering. It can be upsetting. So check in with yourself because you are not going to do any good in the world if you're crumbling on the inside. So if you can take care of yourself, reach out for help, hug your dog or your person, take a deep breath, watch a comedy, whatever it is that you do, take a walk. This is heavy stuff. So maybe I should do that. And everyone out there, including myself, let's all take care of ourselves because we deserve it. We really, really do.